Does anyone in this room have any experience with body mapping and or the Alexander technique? Or know what those things are? Okay, good. So we are going to dive into the first section of what every musician needs to know about the body. And so when I would do this course in a for real situation, there would be 6 hours of class, and each hour is going to cover a different subtopic relating to the human body. So in this first hour, we're going to talk about body mapping fundamentals. We're going to map our spine, and we're going to learn a little bit about inclusive awareness. So I think that these 3 things are going to be really beneficial moving forward for you all into your semester and your music making. So why would somebody want to study body mapping? And as we're going to learn, body mapping is taking a look at how we perceive our bodies, and then we're going to compare that to anatomical reality, and then we're going to make sure that how we perceive our body is aligning up with anatomical reality. So, accurate information about the body in movement is the most efficient way to teach any musical skill. In body mapping, we don't really teach anything about body mapping with imagery. So imagery is an experiential-based thing. Everybody has their own kind of experiences with imagery, and someone's experience might not line up with others. So when we teach any kind of movement or skill in body mapping, we're talking about concrete, factual information. Injury is at epidemic levels among student and professional musicians. So if I had to call on someone, which I'm going to do, I want you to tell me how many percent of working musicians have reported working with injury. And I'm going to call on Champion right here.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that. I'd say about 70%.
Okay. Nice answer. How about you right here? In the mint green sweatshirt?
Oh, me. Oh. I thought that was okay. Let's say about 85.
85?
Yeah, 85%.
Okay. So those are usually higher numbers than I get for this answer, and you guys are about correct. So a recent Bureau of Labor Statistics studies showed that 75 to 80% of musicians are working actively with injury. And although I think that number is probably going to be a little higher, I'm sure that there is quite an amount of stigma associated with injury in our field, and I'm sure that there are a certain amount of people that are not reporting their injury due to that stigma. So body mapping absolutely has the potential to save careers. So in this kind of talk we're going to train movement, or we're going to talk about what training movement looks like, and then we're going to train our senses. All relevant senses associated with music making need to be trained to sense and discern and respond in a timely manner. So we're going to talk about these 2 things in detail today. So if you had to fill in this blank, what would you say you would fill it in with? Call them out.
Place.
Stars.
Sacrifice for mental health.
Yeah, okay. Valid. So the real answer is that we move. Everything we do in music making is movement. There's movement in breathing, there's movement in finger technique, there's movement in really every single aspect of music making. So we need to make sure that when we're training musicians, we're also training movers. So we want to move and play well into our real, true maturity. You know, so say Michael Jordan, okay? When he was playing basketball, he wasn't expected to be playing basketball well into his 60s. You know, he wasn't going to be out there on the field with a one-legged scooter shooting hoops. You know, he was going to retire by 30 and live a nice life. But here, as musicians, we want to develop well into that maturity, and we want to be able to move for decades. So we need to make sure that our music making is on a really firm somatic foundation. So somatics are a study of body in movement. So there's a lot of things that are somatic studies. We have yoga, we have Feldenkrais, we have body mapping, Alexander technique. Anything where the body is under a microscope for the human experience is a somatic study. So some of the pioneers, this is just some groundwork, we're moving through fast. Idiokinesis uses alignment-based imagery. The Feldenkrais method works primarily with really fine movements. The Rolf and Rolfing is about aligning our bodies through gravity. And the Alexander technique and body mapping, which are relatively similar, are some of the more recent somatic studies. So with the Alexander technique, we're going to have a teacher, an Alexander technique teacher, who's going to come and they're going to put their hands on your body and move you into a place. Whereas with body mapping, we are going to intellectualize anatomical information and then make those adjustments ourselves. So no one's touching me. So why do we need somatics? The relevant information from the field of somatics prevents injury and promotes facility. A lot of the people that I've worked with have come to body mapping because they're injured and they leave with a greater facility at their instrument because they're moving in a coordinated and organic way. So a body map is one's neuronal self-representation in the brain of the structure, function, and size of anything in the musculoskeletal system. So we're talking bones, we're talking muscles, we're talking ligaments, all sorts of connective tissue. We can integrate into our knowledge, and just through integrating that into our knowledge, we will respond and behave in a different way. So this is roughly what a body map is. It's a part in your brain. It is plastic. It can grow and evolve as we learn about the body. I would also venture to say that it would grow and evolve to respond to trauma of the body. So the part of the brain where the body map is located is absolutely plastic and is growing all the time. So we can see here on this homunculus, part of the brain that's shaded, and then we have all of these things. So on the left, we have the somatosensory side. So this is how we perceive stimuli. And so the things that are denser up there, like the lips and the mouth, they perceive through senses more vastly than, say, the elbow does, right? We don't go around feeling our way through life with our elbows. You know what I mean? So the density of the elbow is less complex. Then when we look at the motor side, that's our movement. We see that the hand is very dense and very big, so the hands have a greater potential for movement than, say, our trunk. Okay? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. This is kind of just to prove and show that the body map is in the brain, and it is real, and it is growing, and it is evolving. So body mapping is the conscious correcting and refining of the body map in order to find graceful and organic and coordinated movement. So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to start delving into our body maps to start coordinating movement and putting that behind an instrument. And this is a great quote that I think about, I feel, every single day. The integrity of any movement depends on the integrity of the body map that governs it. So if you have absolutely no idea what's happening in your arm structure, I'm sure that there's a very strong chance that your arms don't really know how to organically move. So we want to make sure that we are, Siri, stop that. We want to make sure that we are lining our anatomical reality up with our perceived kind of view of what our anatomy is. So how do we remap? We're going to inquire, self-inquiry. We're going to question every single joint of our body. We're going to study anatomical images and models. We're going to draw and trace anatomical images. We're going to palpate, firmly press the body to feel bony landmarks, to feel the joints in action, to feel the movement at our fingertips. And we're going to watch beautiful movers. We're going to use mirrors, and we're going to use our kinesthetic sense. So we're going to have an accurate and adequate body map. And the word adequate is really important because a singer might not need to have the most refined body map of their hands because they don't use their hands in the same kind of movement per se as a flutist or a clarinetist. right? And then one of those wind instruments might need to have a really robust map of the hands, where they could maybe have less of the facial expression kind of map that we need. So maps do not need to be conscious to be accurate and adequate. We could just have it, or we could have a mistake in our map. So we are going to build a foundation of information that allows us to develop in performance and pedagogy. So we want to make sure that our teaching is, when we say something and say it as fact, that we know for sure we're teaching fact. And then when we decide to teach using an image, that we are going to teach the image and hope that that works for the student in question. And if it doesn't, then we need to adjust the image. So we're mapping structure, we're mapping size, and we're mapping function. Okay, those are the three things that we're going to be dealing with. So I've provided you with a piece of paper. I want you in the couple, let's take 1 minute to draw your spine in the body that you see. I want you to consider its length, its vertical boundary up top, and our vertical boundary beneath. I want you to take into consideration its width and its thickness. Maybe take into consideration its shape. And then we're going to see what we find out. Are we having fun? Yeah, it's going to be good. These pictures usually aren't right. I'm just going to throw that one out there. See how we're doing that? Nice, nice. Okay, very good, very good. So really keep in mind what you think your spine looks like. And then when I put up this next picture, I want you to compare and see if the vertical length is in alignment with anatomical reality, if the thickness, if the shape. Does your spine look like that on your drawing?
Mine kind of does, mine kind of does.
Okay, okay. I can dig it. Okay, so now we're going to start remapping. So what you drew is how you perceive your spine to be inside your body. And so if you drew one straight line, so a broomstick, you know, that's a real common mismapping. If you haven't marked the vertebrae, that's a very prominent and pretty profound mismapping. So, when we're looking at the spine, there are some things that we need to know. So here I have a spine, and some things about it are that the spine is segmented. So we have multiple little vertebrae, so it's segmented in that way. We have over 24, 26 vertebrae that are stacked on each other, and they're separated by intervertebral discs. We have 4 curves, and it meets so many other structures. So here the spine meets the occiput, which is the bottom of the skull, and it's also connected to the pelvis and the ilions. So if we didn't necessarily perceive that the spine is connected to these structures, we're going to be moving in a way where they're not connected. And if there's any questions, feel free to call them out. The parts of the spine, or the little parts that make up the spine, are called vertebrae. And so here I have 5 different vertebrae, and they are kind of organized by shape and size to serve the functions of the spine. So here we have the atlas and the axis, and these are the top 2 vertebrae of the spine, and these are the ones that connect to the brain. And These form a greater joint, the AO joint, which we're not going to really talk about in much detail today, but this is a place of great sense recepting because there are so many sense receptors and it's so close to our brain, and we can really feel movement in this area. So as we work our way down, we have a cervical vertebrae. You can see that it's kind of small. It has a narrow bed. It has a thin, long, pointy process. We're working our way down. We have a thoracic vertebrae. It's getting slightly bigger. The bed is getting thicker. The hole is getting a little more narrow to accommodate for the growing of the spinal cord. And then here we have the thickest, the lumbar vertebrae, that are so thick that I can't even put my finger around it. Okay? So all of these bumpy things, they are used to reduce unsafe movement. So if I take the spine, for example, and I just bend it all the way back here like this, the processes are resisting me from going any further on this spine, right? So this is maybe the true, actual limit to the kind of spinal extension that we can do. And vice versa, we can maybe do more than that on that way. And if we go laterally, that's going to stop us eventually. If we twist, we're going to run into a bony landmark that stops that movement. So the function of these vertebrae is to make sure that the spinal cord is staying protected and guarded from everything. So when we think about the size, it extends from our AO joint. And we're going to find our AO joint. So if you have perhaps the spine mapped as ending about here, that's interesting. When the AO joint actually extends all the way up right underneath the ears. So a way that we can feel this, let's pretend we're going to point our fingers here, and let's point here, right into our neck. And imagine that between our fingers, there's a pencil. And I want you to flop your head over that pencil, and then flop it over the other way. And notice how there's kind of a spinal movement that's happening, right? So this is not our AO joint. The spine still extends much above this region. But when we look at the mirror and we see our chin, right, this is the beginning of our head. So if we take the fingers up and go right under our earlobes and do the pencil thing again, flop over the pencil, you can almost kinesthetically feel that that is where the top point of the spine is, because the only thing above that is the skull. And another thing that's really awesome is that the spine takes up a great amount of width in the body. So if you map the spine perhaps as really small and really narrow, or really back-sided, that's going to shift the weight delivery that we have in play. So the cervical spine takes up roughly 1/2 of the thickness of the neck, which is amazing to me. Then the thoracic spine takes up 1/3 of the thickness front to back. And then the lumbar spine then goes deep into our core and takes up 1/2 of that width from front to back. So if we have for some reason mapped or believed that our spines are in the back of us, that is a mismapping. Did anybody have that mismapping? Yeah. So the spine is deep. It is our structural support. It is our, and notice that I said support. It is how I think about support. I often used to think that support really came from abdominal and muscular engagement, and I've kind of shifted my thinking to think that my effortless uprightness, my beautifully designed spine, and the natural force of gravity, me touching the earth and the earth coming to meet me, I find that I get a greater support by tapping into that sensation and the sensation of my spine holding me up than I do engaging muscular work. So its function is to house and protect the spinal cord. We talked about that. We have these are called foramens, and they are holes where the spinal cord goes through. It flexes, it extends, twists, lengthens, and gathers, and breathing. I mean, the spine has such a diverse and complex range of motion, and it absorbs shock and delivers weight. So if we perceive as our weight being delivered down the back, let's all stand up for a second. And imagine that our weight is being delivered right down the backs of our back. And notice how your feet are contacting the earth. Notice what is where the feet are kind of planting the firmest. And then let's bring the awareness deeper into our center, front to back. And does your connection with the earth change at all? What happened?
It moves from like the heel into the, like it's more distributed.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what happens. So we want to make sure, you guys can sit, when we're finding this easy, effortless uprightness in music making, we want to make sure that we're allowing the spine in its actual location to hold us up and keep us upright. So we have a couple laws of human movement, and this has totally changed my life. And I hope it changed yours too. So habituated tensing in the muscles of the neck will result in a predictable and inevitable tensing of the whole body. So we could squeeze this hand and really work it, and it's tense, but the tension isn't going to radiate much past the bicep or the pectoral muscle. But if we sit here and squeeze our neck muscles and contract our neck muscles, that tension will radiate throughout the entire body. So we want to make sure that we are releasing those muscles to start releasing the tension. So let's map the muscles. What is the function of the muscles? Sierra. Is that Sierra? No, your mask is on. You know her.
Okay.
She looked like Sierra with a mask on.
I don't.
Okay. Who thinks they want to guess? Yeah.
Stabilize the hand.
Okay. Yeah.
What makes our muscles moving is what moves us.
Yeah. So if you, for some reason, have it mapped that your muscles are responsible for holding up your head, that is going to be a different muscular work than thinking that the muscles are used for actually moving bone. So that is a big kind of component to the muscle. So let's take a look at our bicep, for example. This is a muscle that we all work out all the time. I know I do. And it crosses the elbow and it comes into our pectoral a little bit. When this muscle shortens, it will pull on the forearm, right? So that muscle has contracted, and then when it extends, it releases. Well, there's co-contraction in the back, but it releases, okay? So if we have these muscles, which are all vertical, you want to make sure we keep that in mind. So, then, if this pulls, right, it's going to move our head. So the primary function of all of these muscles is to move the head. So as you're trying to find some stability, know that the muscles are not working as a means to keep the head upright. That's our spine's job. I think that this is an interesting picture. Where's my mouse? Here. So here we see all of this tissue that looks this color. That's all muscle. And then here's our spine, which is absolutely extending halfway through, taking up a wide amount of space in that. So how much percent of the neck is muscle? 50. Yeah, I think that's a good guess. So all of those muscles are only moved to move the head. So when we're moving the head in the flute, there's a muscle pulling to do that. When we're moving anything, there's a muscle working to do that. Downward pull. This is where's my phone at? This is a kind of, it's an opposed pattern of tension that compromises our primary control, which is essentially that the head leads the body, and it originates with tension in the neck. And I feel, myself included, easily get into a pattern of downward pull when I have my phone. So if I have my phone here and I'm looking at it, I've now brought my head off balance. My lumbar area moves forward in space to accommodate, and now I've completely, wrecked, everything is working, and I have an imposed pattern of tension. So what Alexander technique teachers will say is this idea of up and over with the back of the head to kind of come into this more easy lifted, more buoyant state. So this is often caused by the mismapping that the muscles are holding us up. So our law of human movement too is that when movement is free, the head will lead the body and the spine will follow in sequence. So I have a little video where we're going to watch this cheetah, and you can see that his head is absolutely moving first, right? And because his head is moving, the arms and the legs are all moving in order to accommodate for the movement of the head, instead of the legs moving his head and moving his body. So we're going to take a moment right now, and I want you all to stand up. Great, now sit down. Notice how that standing up felt. Notice the quality of movement. Now I want you to stand up, but as you do this, I want you to imagine that your head is rising in space, and then the legs are moving and adjusting to accommodate for that movement. So the head is just going to rise, and then the legs are going to follow. And see what that feels like. Stand up. Was there a difference? Did anybody notice a difference? What?
It felt like more natural, like I wasn't forcing myself to get up.
Yeah. So now, if you can, not all of you can, take a couple steps around. Notice what that feels like. Okay? Notice the quality of movement in the legs. Notice the quality of movement in the feet. And then, stop. And then, how we're going to do it now is that the head is going to move us first, and then the feet are going to move to accommodate. And notice what that feels like. Notice the quality of the movement. Is that different? Anybody notice a difference? No?
Yeah, that's more intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, absolutely. And so, if we think about running, it's the same thing. The head is going to start moving at a speed that's fast enough that the legs have to run in order to catch up, or else we would fall over. So, go on and have a seat. We just want to make sure that all movement, all whole body movement that we do originates from the head. So, the head must lead in all spinal movement. The vertebrae must follow in sequence, one after each other, and the spine must be free to lengthen and gather. If you don't think that the spine lengthens and gathers, then there are probably a ton of muscles that are working to resist that from happening. So just imagine, okay, so the spine absolutely lengthens and gathers in breathing. Did we know that? Every time we breathe, the spine is lengthening and the spine is gathering. Who would like to guess what lengthening or gathering is happening when we inhale? Yeah.
It separates out.
Huh. Anyone else? It does. So it gathers in breathing. So as we inhale, what happens is that the ribs raise, and because the ribs cross the disc, that movement is going to compress the disc. So let's take a moment, and as we're just breathing, see if we can kinesthetically feel a slight gathering of our spine, and then maybe shortening of our body, and then as we exhale, a slight tauntauning of our body. Can we feel it? Yeah? So if we're resisting this movement, perhaps when playing our instruments or singing, then we're likely using muscular work to resist it. So we're going to move on to the senses. We have 5 senses. That's what we've all been told. We see, we taste, we hear, we smell, all of that. And they each have a sense receptor. So when we touch, it's our skin. Okay, when we hear, it's our ears. Our taste is our tongue, right? But in body mapping, we teach a 6th sense. And this is kinesthesia. Thank you. I'm proud of that. So, this is, well, proprioception is the awareness of our body in space without looking at it. And kinesthesia is the awareness of our body in motion. So, let's kind of just show you a little bit about what proprioception and kinesthesia is. So let's put our hands behind our backs. Put your hand into any shape that you want. Anything. We know what our hand is doing, right? So if I had to describe my hand, I would say I'm relatively in the fist, and my thumb is coming between my pinky and my ring finger, which it absolutely is, right? So this is a sense that we have, and this is because our joints have sense receptors that tell us what it's doing, tells our brain what it's doing, without using any other sense to perceive it. Does that make sense? Great. So we want to make sure that when we're making music, we're using our kinesthesia to help us expand our awareness. So, like all senses, they must be trained. We know now in a split second that I don't like black licorice, and I'm not going to eat it, right? That decision-making process is so fast and so instantaneous because we've trained that sense. We've all had a ton of food, we decided what we like, we decided what we don't like, and then we made an action, okay? So we want to train our sensitivity, our discrimination, and our responsiveness to kinesthesia. So here, let's talk about our auditory sense. We use that all the time in music making. So we can sense that we're playing a note, yeah? We discern through our training that the note is sharp. And then we respond to adjust that note back into perfect intonation, like all of us have all the time. Okay? So similarly with kinesthesia, I can feel my body as I play, right? I can feel everything. I have sensor centers in my joints that I know are moving, right? I can discern that I'm off balance, or I'm overly engaged, or I'm not engaged enough, right? And then we can respond to that kind of discernment to make an action to over-engage, to engage a little more, engage a little less, make those choices, right? So, in order to be really fine-tuned to this idea, we want to cultivate what's called inclusive awareness. Has anyone heard of that term before? Okay, cool. So, we have three possibilities. An introspective awareness. This is an awareness of how I'm feeling today, right? Okay, I'm a little hungry. I'm a little sassy. Maybe my leg hurts a little bit, right? I'm sensing things that are all personal, things that you couldn't sense about me, right? And then extrospective awareness, it's the sense material that we're all kind of perceiving together, of course from different viewpoints, right? So we're experiencing this, we can have this in our awareness, the stage, the seats, blah, 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 right? And then we have an inclusive awareness where we incorporate all two of those things into one. So we're gonna, as we're making music, be perceiving our self and how we're feeling, but also be perceiving the world around us. And oftentimes I feel, even sometimes myself, my only awareness is on the music stand. So I'm essentially eliminating 99% of the world around me when I'm making music, which I know, is not helping. So we want to have oneself and the world in a single, fluid gestalt. Does anyone know what gestalt means? More or less, it's that the sum is greater than all of its parts. So an inclusive awareness is greater than purely introspective or purely extrospective awareness. So we want to make sure that we're always being, inclusively aware. And sometimes we don't want to be inclusively aware, though. I could see myself on an airplane not wanting to be so inclusively aware of the plane around me and every being in there that I would probably close my awareness, and that's okay. So, attention. Mental faculty of considering or taking notice of someone. So this is, my attention is on all of you. My attention is on the space behind me. I'm just noticing. I'm not making any judgments. I'm not making any choices. I'm just aware. Concentration, directed attention towards a single object. I'm concentrating on this vertebrae. Okay? Scanning, rapid sequential concentrating. Right? You don't have to have the whole body do it, right? But it can be your eyes and your brain. So attention, just the act of noticing, I think is absolutely more important than concentration and scanning. And it makes your body feel a different way. So here, we're going to kind of do this experiment with two pictures. And this one is a little dark. I'm going to skip it. We'll do one picture. I just don't think the projection is doing it justice. So here, I want you all to just stare at this red flower and only take it in and forget everything else. And I want you to notice how your body's feeling as you're looking right at it and noticing maybe the slight shading of the flower, but we are zoning in on that flower. And when you feel like you've had enough of that flower, I encourage you to take in the flower and all three of the yellow hats. So we're looking at the flower still, we're looking at the yellow hats, all three of them. We are checking how our body is feeling in this moment. Then, when you feel like you've had enough of the three hats and a red flower, see if we can then incorporate the hats of the gentleman in the back here. We have a couple black ones, a little brown one. We are taking in the flower still. It never left us. It's still there. We're taking in the yellow hats. They still belong. Everything belongs. And we're taking in the little black hats and the brown hats. Notice how your body's feeling as you are changing your kind of attention and your awareness. Now I want you to start maybe taking in some of the table. They're all at a table. So think about the little wine bottles and the glasses and the red flower still, and the yellow hat, and the black hats. And then see if we can take in all four corners of the image and notice how we're feeling. We're still taking in the red hat, the red flower, we're still taking in the yellow hat, the black hat, all of the people. There's this girl in blue, she's pretty. And now, what would happen if we zoom out even further and start perceiving some of the wall behind the image? Right, so we're still taking in the red flower, we're still taking in the yellow hats and the pretty lady in blue and the table and the wall and the piano. And then what if you start taking in something even deeper around you? Maybe the sensation of the clothing on your skin, or the sensation of your feet being held by a shoe. Notice how we're feeling as we look at these things and expand and zoom out our awareness. Was there any changes in the quality of your experience as we kind of zoomed out? Okay, champion's nodding. What did you feel?
Well, when you're focusing on one thing, I find that you were able to comprehend more detail of that certain object, whereas when you zoomed out, you were aware of it, not taking in what it is, but you know it's there.
Did anything in your body change?
I felt as if I was zooming out myself.
Anyone else have any observations? Yeah.
I got more tense, but especially when you said the shoe thing, because I was like, oh my gosh, my foot feels like it's trapped now.
So, kinesthesia is a different experience for everyone, so your experience absolutely belongs too. Anyone else? Yeah.
I felt like it was the opposite. I felt like the less that I focused on one thing, like the more relaxed my body felt.
And I tend to have that same reaction. So another way, let's try this. Do we all have our pencils still? We still have that piece of paper? Let's flip it over. I want you to sign, you're going to sign your names maybe 50 times right now, okay? So sign your name. And I want you to stare at the tip of that pen and the paper, signing your name. Zoom that awareness in so fine that all you see is the signature being drawn. Maybe sign it 2 times, 3 times. Notice what your body feels like. Notice what your arm feels like. Notice the quality of the handwriting. So then, as you're signing your name, what if you start zooming out your awareness to take in the actual tip of the pen, signing your name and the paper, and the 4 corners of the page. And sign your name, keep signing, and notice that quality of movement. And then, I'm going to encourage you to start adding 2 objects in your periphery into the equation. So, likely it's going to be a green chair. So maybe start taking in a green chair around you, maybe taking the color of someone's clothing around you, while we're still looking at the 4 corners of the page, and we're signing our name, and we're still taking in the pen to paper idea. And then let's zoom out a little more. Let's take in the space around us. Let's take into consideration the distance behind us. Can we be aware of what's happening behind us if we're not seeing it? Yeah, so let's do it. And my body made an adjustment as I did it. So now let's see something different. Let's zoom out even further. Can we perceive maybe the hallways outside the room, maybe the green room backstage? Add that into your awareness as you're signing your name. And then let's maybe, for funsies, take in all of this stuff that we're taking in right now, and then like zoom out so far that you're looking at New Mexico on the map. And we're in there too, totally aware of all of it, its existence. And when you feel like you're done, you can stop. And then I'd love to hear about that experience from someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
so
awesome.
scary.
Yeah?
You know,
Why?
just focusing on some, like one thing first, you know, you feel scary, you focus, and then it's like expand. Like, oh man, what's going on behind me now? What's behind you? There's the safety. Then you said expand your next, because like, oh my god, before.
Yeah.
So it was just fear.
Yeah, fear. Fear is a very natural thing to have. What about, let's talk, yeah, you.
So something really specific on top of fear. Something really specific that happened is when you told us to go from just the tip of the pen to the four corners of the page, I had to move back to take all the corners in.
Yeah.
It was very near the paper when I was signing, and that's how I usually write, is really close to the paper.
That's downward pull.
And now, opening my view to the paper before I started getting overwhelmed was I had to just come back from the paper to realize that, which almost put my body in a better posture for writing. I didn't feel so enclosed into the paper. I felt more open and could write a lot more.
Imagine if we did that at the piano. How would that feel? Pretty good, I think. Yeah. So, someone talk about the quality of the signature. Did anyone have an experience with that?
I feel like whenever I was focused on just like the tip of my pencil, my name is like very legible. But now towards the end it is like.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Was the quality of movement freer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we now have a totally freer quality of movement, right? And this is the movement that we want, totally free, uninhibited movement, but we've lost that dexterity. So now we need to regain the tactile, the manual dexterity with the freer quality of movement. So if we start kind of increasing our awareness and freeing our body, we might get worse a little first. And then we gotta practice it and we'll get even better than we were before, right? I think that when we zoom in so far, it's a limitation to the experience of all people. So, the ideal condition is one of inclusive awareness, one where we're perceiving ourselves and we're perceiving the world, okay? And I will say, I wouldn't encourage you to go on the next General Recital and zoom out so far that you like totally mess up and have no idea. It's a skill just like any other that needs to be trained and needs to be practiced. So, use your practice strategies, your practice techniques that you've had, all the way up until this point to make that happen. So in conclusion, we know that we move for a living, right? Every finger movement I make is a movement, even though I am playing the flute, right? Somatic study can reduce pain and injury. Body maps change as we grow and learn. I'm sure our body maps absolutely change now as we've learned our spines, right? Name a function of the spine. Someone. Protection. Oh, makes me feel so safe. We're going to train movement through body mapping. So there are other sections where we talk about the movement of the joints in the arms, right? We talk about the movement of the joints in the legs. We talk about the movement of breathing. When we train that movement, that's when we get effortlessness. That's when we get ease, and that's when we get uninhibited performance. And we're going to train our senses and train our kinesthesia through inclusive awareness. So that is the end of my kind of introduction to body mapping. Are there any questions? Not one. Yeah.
Do you have some texts that you would suggest students purchase or look into that can help them learn about this?
Absolutely. So there is a great book that is called Learning the Alexander Technique, which is written by Barbara Conable, who is the founder of body mapping. So So she goes through the whole map there in detail, and it's very easy to read, very lighthearted. And then there are multiple instrument-specific books that I'll be happy to send out an email that has links to all of them. So there's body mapping for flutist, what every singer needs to know about the body, what every oboist needs to know about the body. And they talk about instrument-specific issues. And I'll compile a list and get that to everyone. Yeah?
How do you think body mapping has helped you personally improve your musicianship?
That's a good question. You know, I think I used to definitely suffer from being overly too tense, right? And I think that the one thing I say now so much in my life is that a body in movement is a body in balance, right? So if we're somehow resisting any movement, that's muscular holding. So me sitting here playing my flute, I'm engaging these muscles to keep me upright, right? But as I'm moving, right, we're kind of dispersing the weight throughout the body. As I move the muscles around my body, I'm actually becoming freer, right? And I'm releasing tension. So I think it's just the fact that movement is the thing that keeps us free is probably the biggest thing about how body mapping has changed my musicianship. Anyone else? Okay, well thank you for coming to my TED Talk.